You're listening to the Studyclix Podcast, your number one source for junior cycle and leaving cert tips. We make exams easier. Welcome back to the Studyclix Podcast. My name is Aisling and I'm joined by Andy.
Hello.
And Erin.
Hi.
And we're on the Studyclix social media team, so you might recognize us from there. Today, we're going to be bringing you something a little bit different from what you might expect from the Studyclix podcast, and we're going to be discussing the proposed social media ban for under 16-year-olds in Ireland. So Studyclix ran a survey with our users to get their opinion on the proposed ban, so we're going to talk about the results from that, and as well as our own takes on the whole thing. So before we get straight into that, can you guys remember your first experiences with social media?
Well, we were kind of just looking before we came on because I was trying to see if there's a way of you can find out when you first joined an app, and I looked at my Instagram and I joined in December of 2014, which that might tell you how old I am. But also you can see I looked at Snapchat and I joined in June of 2015, which means actually I can't really give away my age. Well, I could, but that means I was definitely, just about leaving primary school, going into secondary school, which is crazy.
That is mad. Mine was a bit similar. Mine were both 2014. So,
okay.
What about you, Erin?
I think the first kind of experience I had with social media was Musical.ly. So like that was TikTok before it was TikTok. I had that when I was like, I don't know, I think I was like 9 or 10. But like my account was public, so I don't think you could make them private back then, or at least I don't know. I didn't know how to anyway. And like I lost access to the account, but I couldn't get the videos taken down. So I remember like my friends found the account and would just be sending me the videos all the time. And I think I only got it taken down like a year or two ago. I just like reported it a million times. So it's gone now. You can't find it. But yeah, that would probably be my first experience.
It's always so funny when you find someone's like old account and you just know they can't get back into it. Well, I remember when we were younger, we used to have like spam Snapchat accounts and people would have like vlogs on their Snapchat stories.
Oh my God. I think I have one of those.
Yeah. And that like app where you used to be able to submit like anonymous messages.
Like YOLO.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's loads of those. They were crazy. Did anyone else used to like send themselves messages, or was I just really sad?
No, never did that one.
Because people never responded to them, so I'd send myself ones to make it look like I was more like the people have more interest in my life.
No, we have to give the people content.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the streaks on Snapchat and all that sort of pop up if you're in if you're in town. All these random things on the Snapchat story.
My favorite is on the Snapchat story. No replies, won't snap back. Only the real ones know.
So dramatic for what?
The drama. It was great. Do either of you remember like a world without social media at all?
No, not really.
Yeah, as I say, I got Instagram when I was 20, or I was joined in 2014. So I'm gonna drop my age. I was 11 when that happened. So I feel like I don't really remember before that. So I guess it was always there for me.
I was similar. I feel like we had it for most of our like years where we'd be communicating with people outside of like play dates.
Yeah, I feel like we were the perfect age for when it kind of just started to take off a little bit. Me and Aisling anyway.
Yeah, that's what I think is really interesting about like this whole discussion on the social media ban is I feel like a lot of the time it's adults leading the conversation who, experienced growing up without social media and have that kind of perspective. But obviously we all kind of grew up with social media, and in our survey, like pretty much everyone who we surveyed grew up with social media and don't remember a life without it. So from that, I guess some of the things that we found in our survey was that 70% of students think that social media is harmful, which definitely a huge cohort there. And that 81% of students think that social media makes studying harder. I wonder, like, what do you think about that? Would you agree or?
Yeah, well, I don't even know. I don't know if it's particularly social media, but I guess it's linked with being on your phone, and then social media is a huge driver of that. So I'm interested by like 70% find it harmful, because I feel like you always know if something's bad, but it's really hard to stop doing it anyway sometimes. So like I think people, when they know they're scrolling, they shouldn't be, but then they just end up keep doing it anyway. So it's like if it got taken away, it'd be interesting to see how that would whether people would still feel that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like the fact that like it's obvious that students are kind of self-aware in that sense. And I mean, like particularly with social media, certain platforms, the algorithms are designed to keep you using them for as long as possible. So, I mean, yeah, I suppose it's good that students are aware in that sense of like how much that is kind of affecting their daily life.
Yeah, definitely. So we also asked students then on the back of that if they would support the ban on social media for under 16s, and 50% of students said that they support it, which I felt like was a huge cohort. I think a lot of those students surveyed was mostly fourth years, fifth years, and sixth years. So just for a bit of
Mm.
context on who is um, and where that information is coming from. But would you guys support it? What do you think?
To a degree, like I agree with the principle of it. I just like, I don't know. Like you said, it's interesting that majority of the students who said that they support it are probably over the age of 16, so it's like not necessarily something that would affect them. It'd be interesting to see how people under 16 would respond to that. But I think in general, in terms of whether I'd support a ban or not, I think it'd be maybe more beneficial to to place and to implement more restrictions on social media rather than just taking it away entirely. Because I mean, like we were saying, like we'd be a lot older than some of the people that this would be affecting, and like we don't know a world without social media. So obviously people younger than us are probably the same. So I think it's kind of difficult in reality to just completely rip that away from people. Yeah, I don't know. I think like the idea is good because obviously there's a lot of parts of young people's lives that social media would definitely really affect. But yeah, I think it'd be hard to kind of see how you'd actually go about implementing that effectively.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because if you're like banning people under 16, in a way, you're kind of saying that 16-year-olds aren't responsible enough, or that you're blaming people under that age, where really it should be kind of the focus should be more on the people who are providing the service and stuff. And it should be the onus should be
Mm.
on them, I think, to put in more restrictions instead of taking away something from, and like, it's not like 16-year-olds or 12-year-olds, all these people asked for social media and then decided to use it horribly. It's because these things are too easy to get to, and they're like almost pushed that way in a way. Like, so I think, yeah, it's hard. It's like it's not a black and white thing. So it's like you need to find a way to make it fair for everyone. But I definitely think the onus needs to be more on the companies and the people in that situation instead of the actual students themselves. So yeah, I think restrictions on like scrolling and stuff or something could be a good place to start instead.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because it's quite a blanket for solution for something that's a very nuanced problem. And even a lot
Mm.
of like people in the survey said that they thought that students would just get around it. And I guess that's why I think that it's not a great measure, because once you do get around it, that harmful content or kind of the addictive nature of social media is still there. So it doesn't protect people who get around it.
Yeah, or you kind of want the things you can't have as well. If you do that and you take it away, and I've seen in places, if you take away those sort of apps, then people start going to other apps that are kind of lesser known and are even then regulated even worse, and kind of
Mm.
their security isn't anywhere near as good as some of the ones we have at the moment. So like, there's always going to be ways around, I think, because the internet's such a huge thing and phones are such a huge thing that like you have to take everything into account. So I don't think it's that simple of a let's just ban it for 16. And why do you choose the age 16? Why don't you choose 12? Why don't you choose 14? There's going to be people giving out about that. So there's like, it's a if you do something like that, I think you kind of leave yourself open to a lot of criticism and questions. So I think there's different ways of going about it.
Even we received one response that kind of spoke about the idea of, instead of putting the blanket ban on students or kind of the responsibility on the platforms, is putting the responsibility on parents. And like, I'd be interested to know what you think about that. My kind of initial impression of that is that you're expecting a group of people who might not be very like media literate or like know
Mm.
how all these platforms work. Putting the responsibility on them, I'm not sure is like necessarily fair. Obviously, you're responsible for your children, but I think it's not really that effective. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're in this like weird like time period, or like this like lull of that. There's that gap, as you say, in a lot of parents with kids that they obviously didn't have anything, but in like 10 or 15, 20 years times, like when we're having kids and we've had the experience of social media, will we be able to be in a much better position to police that kind of thing? Because as you say, it's so easy to kind of do things slyly or hide things if your parent doesn't really know what they're looking for, or know their way around a phone. With the time we're in now, I think in 10 or 15 years, that'll be much easier to police when we all know how those things work. But now I do think, yeah, it's kind of difficult. I mean, some parents will absolutely know what they're doing, but I mean, there's just going to be such a huge majority, and there's always just ways of hiding things. So I don't know. I think that's a tough one to police as well.
I think as a parent, you definitely have a degree of responsibility, you know, as to what your child is doing on things like social media that have like little to no restrictions. And but I also think it's unfair to fully put the blame on them. Like I think, like as we were saying, I think it's more on the sort of big social media platforms that are just kind of allowing kids to have access to all of these things, you know, because like you were saying, it, like parents might not necessarily be more media literate, whereas obviously the people who work for these companies know all the ins and outs of how they work. So I think as a parent, like there's only kind of so much you can do. And I mean, if you're in a position to be able to, like, I suppose, educate your kids about the dangers, and if you are able to place restrictions, then that's great. But like, I don't think it should be fully on parents either. Also, parents placing restrictions on like social media usage and things is only something that's going to be effective if that's how your kids are brought up. I feel like if it's a case that, you know, your child has been on social media for a long time and then all of a sudden they're like 15 and you're like, right, now you're not able to use XYZ, like it's just not really going to be very effective, I don't think, unless it's something that has been kind of implemented from day one.
Yeah, definitely. Even kind of on a bit of a lighter note, my so when I was younger, like obviously got a phone when I was like 12 or something, and we just got in a bad habit of like we had like bad screen time even then. So my mom, when we were like 14, did try to like she downloaded this app onto our phone that was like it would restrict your phone and like basically you wouldn't be able to use it after like a certain time or just like restrict app usage. So she was trying to like stop us from going on our phones before bed and like actually have like a sound sleep schedule. But we were always kind of like one step ahead of her even then, like, and we just always every time she tried something different we just always find a way around it. It was mostly led by my brother, who actually now studies computer science, so that's probably how he was always one step ahead. But um yeah, I do think like just trying to have like ad hoc parents solutions, I'm not sure that it's the most effective option.
It just creates more problems as well then, because then you're like, when does that like privacy and trust start and end? Like it just creates like a blurred line. I feel like I think there's definitely something to it. And we like me and Erin talked to Richard Hogan, a psychotherapist, on the podcast before, and I've heard him talking about it before. Of, as you say, if you guys don't do it from day one and you suddenly come in like 2 years into it, hey, I'm going to start policing this now. Then they're like, what? Like they're not like used to that at all, and then that just creates a huge clash. And it's like,
Yeah.
so if we start taking it off of like 15-year-olds now on that stuff, I don't know. It just seems like it's going to create a bit of conflict. I guess you just have to see how things go in Australia first, you know?
Junior cycle maths can feel like a big jump, but Studyclix Maths Boost makes it simple. With over 300 video tutorials, confidence building exercises, and expert examiner tips, you'll have everything you need to master algebra, geometry, and more. And for podcast listeners, here's €10 off. Use podcast 10 at checkout. Go to studyclix.ie and start studying smarter today.
Well, I guess speaking of Australia, so this whole kind of conversation has came out of the fact that Australia has recently imposed a ban on social media for under 16. So kind of just an overview of how it seems to be working there is that the responsibility is totally on the platforms. Obviously, like using social media is not criminalized or anything. But the responsibility is on the platforms to kind of assess their users, and when they think that someone is under 16, or obviously just having an existing account where you said that you were under 16, it is to like deactivate that account, or if it just thinks that you're under 16, to ask for age verification. So that came into practice, I think, a couple of months ago. It's still in quite like early stages, so there isn't that much data on how effective it is. But that's kind of where this whole conversation has came from. So from that, a lot of other countries have started discussing, kind of doing similar things. I think in Ireland so far, it's at a very early stage with the discussion. There's no um, legislation yet, I think. So it's kind of still a discussion, which is interesting. I think also, obviously in the Irish context, I come from a legal background. Like within the EU, obviously you have like rights to freedom of expression and different things. And, you know, whether or not you would be able to have such a blanket ban, if that's kind of a disproportionate restriction on your like rights to freedom of expression, is an interesting. Yeah, factor to consider, figure out whether or not they'd actually be allowed to impose this ban. But obviously, I don't know for sure. That's just kind of my like preliminary legal assessment. Even off the fact of like the right to freedom of expression, I wonder what you think about kind of the fact that social media, the point has been made that social media, although it can have harmful aspects, it also is a tool for like kids to express themselves. And also it's kind of found a lot like vulnerable communities can find community on social media where maybe they wouldn't have like those support groups in real life. I think, you know, obviously social media can be harmful, but there is like positive aspects to it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, social media is good for community and stuff. I mean, like, as someone who's doing the arts, if you will, musical theater, um, it's a great way for like people to. I guess I've found loads of people who are in the same sort of industry as me in Ireland, and then even abroad in the UK, and it's a good way to make contacts or see people and get in touch with people. Like I've had directors and stuff and producers and things who I don't know who've come to see things I've been in. They're able to text me after and stuff like that. And social media is great for that kind of thing. And just seeing that there are other people with the same interests as you. If you feel like there's no one in your school that's alone, like as a guy in secondary school who's big into sport, to be big into music and musicals as well. Like there's not that many who were in my year who were like that. So I think um seeing that there's other people in schools like that around the country is nice. Obviously, there's loads of uh, negatives to social media, but I think that's something that is definitely really, really lovely. And that's like one of the biggest reasons I use social media is to see things about that, my own community, my own thing. Like, I don't really use most social media for much else, to be honest. But yeah, no, it's great for that kind of thing. And for kids who are like, as I say, if I was at that age and I saw that kind of thing, I think that'd be really nice to see. And it was nice to see that I wasn't alone or there was other people doing the same sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to kind of have those sort of connections. It'd be harder, obviously, to find things out. I think, had we not, like, did we not have social media, it's definitely, and I mean, a lot of it, I suppose, is probably algorithm based as well. You're more likely
Mhm.
to be shown things that appeal to you and that you can relate to, which I think is nice because, like you said, it can be hard to sometimes find those communities or like have people relate to those interests maybe in real life.
Mhm.
So yeah, I definitely think in some senses it can be really beneficial if people get bullied or something for a particular interest. It can be nice to find that sort of corner where you can actually relate to people in your circle. But I think it's difficult then to sort of know where that line can kind of get crossed. Yeah, it can just, I feel like it can just be a bit tricky to gauge like where your kind of like, I suppose, freedom of expression or like ability to stumble upon communities like that should end from like a safeguarding point of view.
Yeah. I mean, another thing as well, I was talking about with someone last night is about like, uh, especially this would be like, I think prevalent for 12 to 16-year-olds, that kind of age group, when you see all these things, like how much of it is people show their highlights on social media and there's so much like that you don't see. So like we were talking about, just for example, if someone runs a marathon and stuff, or something like that, or they go for their 5K and you don't see like the mental breakdown they had afterwards because they were like, that was the worst time of my life, or beforehand, how long it took them to actually
Mm.
do that. And they just post, oh, I did it. And you're like, God, I want to be like them. And all this sort of stuff where you see you just, uh, like there's just, you can really paint a picture of the best bits, and you can actually be having not a very good time at all. So for younger people, you need to have the knowledge and the understanding that sometimes uh, a lot of social media is like people's
Mhm.
best bits and fake, and some of it, that's not how real life actually looks or is for anyone, and no one's
Mhm.
like having an easier, well, I mean, it's probably an easier ride than others, but I mean, yeah, everybody has like hard moments, but they're not going to be putting, oh my God, just had a panic attack today on Instagram, so,
Yeah,
but yeah,
right.
100%.
Not laughing at people having panic attacks on
no,
Instagram.
not at all.
But no, yeah, but that's definitely an interesting point, I think, because even, you know, when you talk about like a ban or a restriction, you could like make the platforms put in more restrictions, but you could never make the platforms be like, be more real. Like that's
Yeah,
totally user generated and
that's
like
what
there's
Be
not
Real's
really
for.
anything that you can do about that. But I think even the point has been made that if you just ban like social media for 16-year-olds, then after when they come on when they're 16, they have no experience with social media, that maybe they wouldn't be as well equipped to kind of even realize things like that social media is, paints a glossy picture and all this, because they have no experience with it. So,
Hmm.
having experience, you come to realize that, which is also like an interesting point. In terms of, we were talking about running and 5Ks, and we asked our users, what would you do instead of go on social media if there was a ban? And a lot of users came in and said that, they would have more time to like read. And a lot of them are like now doom scrolling instead of reading, which same guys. Or
Mhm.
like exercise. Is there anything that you would do that you think that like social media is taking up a lot of your time and you'd like to have more time to do instead?
I definitely relate to that. I mean, with reading even, I used to read so much, and I mean, I've always like had access to social, well, not always, but but I found that like during lockdown and stuff, I used to read so many books. I'd read like 40 books in a year, and then the past few years, like I just haven't had the attention span for it at all, and I've tried to get back into it this year. Um, I read like 2, which I'm really proud of
Very
myself
good.
for, I'm not gonna lie. But like I find that even when I'm reading, sometimes I'll still like pick up my phone to check if I've gotten any notifications or whatever. And it's like I need to just like I wish I could just put it away completely. I think that it's hard to I don't know, it's hard to like find a chance for me anyways to like fully like give your 100% attention to like I don't know, a hobby or something else that I suppose is more kind of grounded in reality.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I find like one of the responses on the survey as well was like being present in the room, and that's a big thing. Like, so whenever I go on walks, I'll leave my phone behind a lot of the time, or if I'm with someone, I'll try and like not be on my phone. But like for when I'm doing shows and stuff, and I'm in rehearsals for that, like if I'm not being used for something, I always kind of just go on my phone, and I really try and stop myself from doing that, because especially when you're doing the things that you love and enjoy, I feel like you really don't want to be on your phone, and you just kind
Mm.
of naturally gravitate to do that all the time when you have a second. And I'm just like, why can't you just like look in and like take in like stuff for like, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like there's a huge thing as well for me anyway with like guilt and my phone and stuff and feeling guilty, and I feel like that's a
Yeah.
thing I'd be really interested to see. I don't know, there wasn't a question on that in the survey, I don't think, but there was like definitely some people mentioned it about feeling guilty and stuff about not studying when they're on their phone and stuff, and that kind of stems from there. And I just
Yeah.
feel like social media causes that a little bit sometimes, even you feel guilty being honest instead of doing other things.
Mhm.
Yeah, even still now, I find that like with studying for college, I feel like everything takes me like double the amount of time that it should, because every
Mm.
time I read for 5 minutes, then I have a 5-minute phone break and it just takes way longer than it should. I
Mhm.
know when I was in the Leaving Cert, I used to use, I think it's called Forest, and there's like a free version called Flora, which like locks your phone
Yeah,
effectively, which actually really works. I think like even just having that thing of like picking up your phone and it being locked and having that reminder of like, oh
yeah.
no, like I shouldn't go on, it does really help. But yeah, I haven't found the willpower in me to go back to using Forest. I probably should though.
Yeah, I've got a screen like restriction thing as well that lets me on Instagram like 5 times a day for 10 minutes at a time. And
Oh, nice.
now I'll reset it definitely once a day. So I'll probably end up going on about 8 times a day, but it's less than I would if it was just open all the time. And that same thing is because I feel like when you just, sometimes you grab your phone and and before you know it, you're like, when did I actually go on this? And you're like actually having it in your hand. And so sometimes I turn my phone off completely if it's in my bag. So then if I'm like doing something, I go to take it out and I go, why is that off? Oh yeah. Because I don't want to, because you go to like instantly go on it and then you have that second of, why am I doing this? I actually don't need to do that. And then
Yeah.
because it's turned
Oh
off
my God.
already, you're like, oh man.
That happens to me all the time. Like I'll go on looking for something in particular, like to look something up, and then I'll forget immediately as
Yeah.
soon as I go onto the app, and I just spend ages doom scrolling because I've forgotten what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. I have a 3 hour screen time limit on TikTok and I reach that like
Oh my
every
goodness.
day. Like it's so bad. It's really bad. But even I think that's another thing like with the social media ban is like the actual specific design of social media platforms to be addictive. I think the Media Commission is looking into some of the social media platforms and maybe the EU. Like the platforms are actually designed to be that way, which
Yeah.
is definitely interesting. Like that's something that you could target instead of just a blanket ban.
Yeah, I remember there was ages with TikTok where you like couldn't see the time on the app when you were scrolling. I think it was like
Oh.
designed that way so that you couldn't see how long you were actually spending on the app and you were more inclined to just keep scrolling because you had no kind of sense of what was happening around you, which is really kind of crazy.
Lovely to hear, isn't it? But I guess I wonder, the reason we're all like that, is that because we use social media when we were younger, or is it because it's just the way it is? I wonder, like, if you took, because I wonder if you took it away now, under 16, are people still going to use it just as much when they get out, or they use it even more? Because I actually don't think if I didn't have it when I was that age, that it would make me use it less now, to be honest.
I know. I feel
I
like a lot of my friends now at this stage have just turned to like deleting the apps. Like a lot of my friends have
Yeah.
deleted TikTok, and I'm like, well, I can't do that because it's my job. But
Mhm.
at this stage, like that's what it's like come to, and that's what seems to work for them. But then a lot of my friends delete TikTok, and then they just spend the same amount of time on Instagram Reels. So one of them
Yeah,
will get you.
I've seen that happen a lot. Yeah, it's no escape.
So we've kind of talked a bit about like how we think that a blanket ban might not be effective. So we asked students what would they have instead of a outright ban on social media, and one response that I thought was interesting. It's a little bit long, but I'm just gonna call it out. Is that rather than banning social media for under 16s, I would focus on making platforms safer and reducing harm directly. This could include forcing companies to turn off addictive features for minors, which we've kind of discussed a bit about the addictive nature of social media, and they name infinite scrolling, autoplay, and aggressive notifications. Stronger moderation rules and faster removal of harmful content aimed at young users would also matter more than age limits alone. Alongside that, digital literacy education in schools would help students understand algorithms, online pressure, misinformation, and how to manage screen time. Teaching how social media works is often more effective than pretending it doesn't exist. Finally, I'd support parental control tools that actually work, giving families real choices rather than one size fits all law that's hard to enforce. I thought that was really interesting. There's like quite a good few points in there of like different alternatives. One that I find quite interesting as well is understanding algorithms, because actually in one of my classes we've been studying that a lot of people like tend to blame algorithms outright for kind of this extremist content or populism, or even if you've seen that adolescence show, like kind of attributing that to algorithms. But research actually finds that kind of extremist content is more based on user demand. So like a user goes to seek it out, and that's what results in it showing up on their algorithms. So I think like media literacy in terms of that is really interesting, because there is like misinformation about the way social media works itself, like aside from the fact that social media can spread information. And when you're like, what are your takeaways from that? What do you think would be a good alternative to the outright ban?
I think it's really interesting as well, the line about teaching how social media works is often more effective than pretending it doesn't exist. I feel like that could be said for so many things that kind of begin to affect young people as they grow up. Like, I think there's so many instances where I guess like schools and also parents maybe just like refuse to acknowledge certain aspects of life and pretend they don't exist and don't, educate kids about them. And then it leads to more problems in the long run because they're not getting that proper education about how they should manage things like that and be able to deal with things like this that are kind of inevitable parts of growing up. And I definitely think that, yeah, teaching how to actually navigate life on social media or online is something that's way more beneficial in the long run, because like we've kind of been discussing, it's likely that young people are going to find ways around the ban if it's something that they're like have any interest in doing. Or I feel like it's easy enough to find ways around things like that. I mean, even in the case of Australia, I was looking at one sort of case study, and like even in the cases of age verification and things like that, people would just be kind of like passing driver's licenses around or whatever, and like using each other's IDs to verify age, or like certain apps would have kind of different ways of doing it compared to others. So like it has been easy for some people to find ways around it. And so I think no matter what you kind of do, even if you like, I just think that providing that education would make far more of a difference than just taking it away entirely, because even if it's something that like is going to stop the problem for now, it might create more problems down the line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. More digital literacy and teaching people in the schools, because I know in Australia I've been looking up about it, and there was like a huge surge. It said when originally the ban started in different apps, there was these 3 other names. I can't remember the apps. Never heard of them in my life, but they were like being used as replacements for Instagram and stuff like that. And then also VPNs, which just like, you can change your location so then you can bypass local laws and stuff. So there's just ways around all these things if people really want to. So I think, we need to tackle it from a different angle.
Yeah, I think kind of the fact that they haven't like consulted young people in like making these bans in Australia, and even in Ireland, there's people have been talking about a ban, but there's been no public consultation process, I think, from what I understand. That it kind of like undermines the effectiveness of these like mechanisms to try and reduce the harm of social media. So I think like it's definitely important to kind of get young people's opinions on these things. So I guess that's kind of our key takeaways from the discussion on the social media ban. If you'd like to read a bit more about what students taught themselves, you can find the survey results on studyclix.ie. So this episode was a little bit different for us in talking about something that's a bit more topical. If there's any other topics or issues facing young people that you think that we should talk about, you can send us a message on Instagram. We would love to know. And we'll finish up there. Thanks so much for listening. As a treat for our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast10 for €10 off any Studyclix upgrade. If you found this podcast helpful, it would be amazing if you could share it with a friend to spread the word, rate and review wherever you're listening, and hit the notification button so you're the first to know when a new episode drops. Bye, guys.
Bye.